The gunshot echoed across the vast Wyoming plains as Knox Blackwood reined in his stallion, Thunderbolt, and squinted at the horizon where storm clouds gathered ominously. It was 1879, 7 long years since he'd last seen Violet Kensington, and now a desperate letter from her sister had sent him racing across 3 territories to reach the town of Whispering Pines before it was too late. "Just a bit further, boy," Knox murmured to his exhausted horse, patting the animal's sweat-slicked neck. The past 4 days had been brutal, sleeping under the stars, crossing swollen rivers, and outrunning a band of outlaws who'd taken interest in his fine stallion. But none of that mattered now. Violet needed him, even if she didn't know it yet. Knox adjusted his worn Stetson, feeling the familiar weight of his Colt revolver against his hip. At 32, his face bore the weathered lines of a man who'd spent his life under the punishing western sun. His dark beard was flecked with trail dust, and his blue eyes, once described by Violet as summer sky trapped in winter ice, had hardened from years working as a ranch foreman in Colorado Territory. The letter crinkled in his breast pocket as he urged Thunderbolt forward again. Catherine Kensington's handwriting had been shaky, desperate. "Violet's husband passed 6 months ago. The banker Hollister is circling like a vulture, threatening to take everything. She won't ask for help, Knox. Her pride won't let her. But I remember how you once looked at each other. If there was ever anything there, she needs that man now. Anything there." Knox nearly laughed at the understatement. What had been between them was a wildfire that consumed everything until her father intervened. Until the promise of a Boston education and a proper life pulled her away. Until letters stopped coming and Knox buried himself in work and whiskey. The first raindrops struck his face as Thunderbolt crested the final hill, revealing Whispering Pines in the valley below. 7 years ago, it had been little more than a trading post and a few scattered buildings. Now it was a proper town with a church steeple, storefronts, and at least 50 buildings sprawled along the main street. "Well, look at that," Knox muttered. "Civilization's come to Wyoming." As he rode down toward the town, the rain began falling in earnest. By the time he reached the main street, water streamed from the brim of his hat, and his duster was soaked through. Few people were out in the downpour, but those who were hurried along the wooden sidewalks with heads bent against the weather. Knox dismounted outside the Whispering Pines Hotel, tying Thunderbolt to the hitching post. The animal needed rest, food, and shelter much like himself. He patted the horse's flank before climbing the steps to the hotel's covered porch. Inside, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers looked up from behind the front desk. "Nasty weather to be traveling in, stranger." "Been in worse," Knox replied, removing his hat and shaking water from it. "Need a room and stable care for my horse." $2 a night for the room, 50 cents for the stable, the man said, sliding a registry book across the counter. "Planning to stay long?" Knox dipped a pen in the inkwell. "Depends on how my business goes." "And what business brings you to our little town?" The clerk's tone was conversational, but Knox recognized the careful curiosity of small-town folk toward newcomers. "Personal matters," Knox answered, signing the registry. "Old friends." "Well, we're a friendly sort here in Whispering Pines." "I'm Herbert Mason, owner of this establishment and town councilman." Knox nodded. "Knox Blackwood." Mason's eyebrows rose slightly. "Blackwood. The same Blackwood who worked the Circle K ranch some years back." Knox's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. "You know me." Mason laughed, raising his hands. "No cause for alarm. It's just that Miss Violet mentioned a Blackwood once or twice. Her late husband's ranch neighbor, as I recall." Knox's heart quickened. "Violet Kensington. You know where I can find her. It's Violet Preston now, or rather Widow Preston. Poor woman's been having a rough go of it since James passed. Mason's voice lowered. Ranch is about 3 miles north of town, though if you're an old friend, I should warn you she's in a difficult position. That banker Hollister is pressing hard for her land. Knox pocketed the room key Mason handed him. Appreciate the information. Room 4, top of the stairs. I'll have a boy see to your horse. Mason hesitated. Mr. Blackwood, if you don't mind my saying, Miss Violet could use a friend right now. Town's divided on the matter. Some think a woman shouldn't be running a ranch alone. Others think Hollister's methods aren't entirely honorable. I'll keep that in mind, Knox said, then paused. One more thing, is Catherine Kensington still in town? Mason's face brightened. Oh yes, runs the schoolhouse now. Lives in the little white cottage behind it. Knox nodded his thanks and headed upstairs. In his room, he stripped off his wet clothes and washed away 4 days of trail dust as best he could with the basin of water provided. The mirror above the washstand reflected a face he barely recognized, leaner and harder than the young ranch hand who'd fallen for Violet Kensington 7 years ago. He'd been 25 then, working his way up from cowpuncher to foreman at the Circle K. Violet had been 19, fresh from finishing school back east and reluctantly spending a summer at her father's Wyoming holdings. Knox remembered the first time he saw her riding side saddle across the meadow, her dark hair escaping its pins, cheeks flushed with exertion and rebellion. "Father insists I ride like a lady," she'd told him later, "but the horses hate it as much as I do." The next day, he'd found her a proper saddle and taught her to ride astride when her father wasn't watching. By midsummer, they were meeting in secret riding at dawn, picnicking by the river, stealing kisses under the vast Wyoming sky. By August, they were planning a future together. Then September came, bringing with it Judge Kensington's discovery of their plans. The judge had been coldly efficient. Knox was dismissed from the Circle K, and Violet was sent back east to finish her education properly. Knox had written letters for months. Violet's replies grew shorter, then stopped entirely. A year later, he heard she'd married James Preston, son of a Denver banker. Knox pulled on clean clothes and sat heavily on the bed. 7 years was a long time. Violet was a widow now, struggling to hold onto her ranch, and he was, what? A fool chasing an old dream. A knight riding to a maiden's rescue. Or just a man who'd never stopped loving a woman who'd moved on without him. Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky. Knox lay back on the bed, listening to the rain and wondering what tomorrow would bring when he faced Violet Preston for the first time since she'd broken his heart. Morning arrived with clearing skies and a town coming to life. Knox ate breakfast in the hotel dining room, gathering information from conversations around him. Whispering Pines had grown during a copper mining boom, though the mines were playing out now. The Preston Ranch was one of the largest cattle operations in the county, or had been, until James Preston's death. Now Hollister's bank held notes on the property, and rumors circulated that the banker was more interested in the land than loan repayment. Knox's first stop was the small white cottage behind the schoolhouse. Catherine Kensington answered his knock immediately, as if she'd been watching for him. "Knox Blackwood," she said, her face lighting with relief. "You actually came. Your letter didn't leave much room for debate," he replied. Catherine, 5 years older than Violet and unmarried by choice, had always approved of Knox. Now she pulled him inside the cottage and closed the door. "I wasn't sure you'd still care enough to come," she admitted. Knox removed his hat. "I'm here. Now tell me exactly what's happening." Catherine's story confirmed what he'd already pieced together. James Preston had died of pneumonia 6 months ago, leaving Violet with their 5-year-old son, William, and a ranch heavily mortgaged to expand their herd. Hollister had called in the loans immediately upon James's death, giving Violet until the end of summer to pay in full. "The ranch is profitable," Catherine explained, "but not enough to pay everything at once. Violet's tried selling stock, but prices are down. She's dismissed most of the hands to save money, keeping only old Hank and young Miguel. 2 men can't run a cattle operation that size," Knox said. "I know. She's working herself to exhaustion." Catherine's voice broke. "Knox, I wouldn't have written if I thought there was another way. Violet's too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to give up." "Does she know you contacted me?" Catherine shook her head. "She never speaks of you, not since." "Well, not for years." Knox stood, placing his hat back on. "I should go see her." "Wait." Catherine caught his arm. "There's something else you should know. Hollister's not just after the ranch, he's after Violet. He's proposed marriage twice already, presenting it as a solution to her problems." Knox's jaw tightened. "I see. Be careful, Knox. Violet's not the same girl you knew. Life has made her cautious, especially with her son to protect." "And I'm not the same man," he replied. Knox borrowed a horse from the livery stable, leaving Thunderbolt to rest another day. The ride to the Preston ranch took him through rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and ponderosa pine. As he crested the final ridge, the ranch spread before him, a sprawling main house, barn, bunkhouse, and corrals with cattle grazing on the grasslands beyond. A young boy spotted him first, running from the chicken coop toward the house shouting, "Mama, rider coming." Knox's heart hammered as a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the morning sun. Even at this distance, he would know her anywhere, the proud set of her shoulders, the way she stood with one hand on her hip. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and she wore a practical work dress rather than the fashionable clothes of her youth. As Knox approached, the boy William, he presumed, ran to stand protectively in front of his mother. A good lad, Knox thought, already looking out for his family. Knox reined his horse to a stop and dismounted, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He removed his hat as he approached the porch steps. "Good morning, Violet," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes, those remarkable green eyes that had haunted his dreams for 7 years, widened in shock, then narrowed with wariness. "Knox Blackwood," she finally said, her voice cool and controlled. "This is unexpected." "I was passing through," he lied. "Heard about your situation." Her chin lifted defiantly. "And you thought I needed rescuing? I assure you, Mr. Blackwood, I'm managing my affairs quite adequately." The formality stung, but he'd expected nothing less. "Never thought otherwise. You were always capable." William tugged at his mother's skirt. "Mama, who is this man?" Violet placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "An old acquaintance, William. Mr. Blackwood worked for your grandfather many years ago." Knox knelt to the boy's level. "Pleasure to meet you, William. That's quite a fine stick you're carrying." The boy held up the carved wooden piece proudly. "It's my sword. I'm practicing to fight bad guys." "A worthy pursuit," Knox said solemnly. "Every ranch needs a good defender." William studied him with curious eyes, his mother's eyes. Knox noted with a pang, "Do you know how to fight bad guys?" "William," Violet interrupted, "please go help Miguel gather the eggs. I need to speak with Mr. Blackwood." The boy hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his post as protector. "It's all right, partner," Knox assured him. "Your mama and I are old friends." Once William had run off toward the chicken coop, Violet's composed expression faltered. "Why are you really here, Knox?" Catherine wrote to me, he admitted. "She's worried about you." Anger flashed across Violet's face. "She had no right. This isn't your concern." "Maybe not," Knox agreed. But I came anyway. Why, we haven't spoken in 7 years. Knox met her gaze steadily. You know why? Something flickered in her eyes, pain, memory, or perhaps both before she looked away. Things are different now. I have responsibilities, a son, a ranch to save. I'm not here to complicate your life, Violet. I'm offering help, nothing more. She laughed without humor. Help? What exactly do you propose? To pay off Hollister, to run my ranch for me? Or perhaps you're offering marriage as a solution, just like him? The bitterness in her voice caught him off guard. I'm offering an extra pair of hands and someone who knows cattle. Nothing more, nothing less. You can accept or refuse. Violet studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against whatever calculations were running through her mind. Finally, she sighed. 2 men quit last week. Miguel's good with horses but too young for the heavy work. Hank's back is troubling him again. She gestured toward the fields. We need to move the herd to summer pasture before the lower meadow dries out completely. It wasn't acceptance, not exactly, but it was an opening. Knox nodded. I can start today. $10 a week plus meals. The bunkhouse has empty beds. Fair enough. Violet turned to go back inside, then paused. Knox, thank you for not mentioning the past in front of William. He doesn't need to be confused by complicated histories. Before Knox could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. A man in a fine suit rode toward the house, accompanied by 2 rougher-looking riders. Violet's posture instantly stiffened. Hollister, she muttered, then called to her son. William, come inside now. The boy raced back to the house as the 3 riders approached. Knox stepped to Violet's side, instinctively placing himself between her and the newcomers. Mrs. Preston, the lead rider called jovially as he dismounted. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Franklin Hollister was in his 40s, well-groomed and expensively dressed, with the soft hands of a man who'd never worked a day of physical labor. His smile didn't reach his cold eyes, which assessed Knox with immediate suspicion. Mr. Hollister, Violet acknowledged, I wasn't expecting you today. Just riding by, thought I'd check on your progress. Hollister's gaze remained on Knox. I don't believe I've had the pleasure. Knox Blackwood, Knox offered, not extending his hand. New hand at the Preston ranch. Hollister's eyebrows rose. Indeed. I was under the impression Mrs. Preston was reducing staff, not hiring. Mr. Blackwood has experience with cattle drives, Violet said smoothly. We need to move the herd to summer pasture. How fortunate he arrived just when you needed him. Hollister's tone suggested he found it anything but fortunate, though I wonder if investing in more labor is wise, given your financial situation. Knox felt Violet tense beside him but admired how her voice remained steady. I'm well aware of my obligations, Mr. Hollister. Moving the herd ensures better weight gain, which means better prices at market. Of course, Hollister said dismissively. Though I've been thinking, Mrs. Preston, it might be simpler to sell the herd now. I have buyers interested. You could clear your debts immediately and avoid all this struggle. At summer prices, that would barely cover half what I owe, Violet replied. Better half now than nothing later, Hollister said, his pleasant facade slipping. The offer I made last week still stands. A partnership would resolve everything neatly. Knox didn't miss the implication, nor the way Hollister's eyes roved possessively over Violet. His hand instinctively moved closer to his gun. Thank you, but my answer hasn't changed, Violet said firmly. Now if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Hollister's smile tightened. As you wish, Mrs. Preston, but remember the note comes due August 1st. That's less than 2 months away. He glanced at Knox. I hope your new employee understands the temporary nature of his position. Knox met the banker's gaze evenly. I understand exactly what's happening here. Something in Knox's tone made Hollister step back slightly. He tipped his hat to Violet. "Good day, Mrs. Preston. I'll be in touch." As the three men rode away, Violet let out a shaky breath. "That man makes my skin crawl. Seems the feeling's mutual," Knox observed. "His friends look more like hired guns than bankers. Bolton and Reeves," Violet said quietly. "They work for him, though no one's quite sure what they do. James never trusted them." She looked at Knox. "This is what you're getting into, Knox. Hollister wants this land and he's not particular about how he gets it." Knox held her gaze. "All the more reason you shouldn't face him alone." For the first time, Violet's composure cracked, revealing the exhaustion beneath. "I've been alone for 6 months. I'm managing." "You don't have to be alone anymore," Knox said softly. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and memories. Then William burst from the house, breaking the tension. "Mama, I found Pa's spyglass in the drawer." He stopped short, noticing the atmosphere. "Are the bad men gone?" Violet quickly composed herself, kneeling to her son's level. "Yes, they're gone, and Mr. Hollister isn't bad exactly. He's just determined." William frowned. "He makes you sad." "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about business," Violet explained, smoothing his hair. "Now, why don't you show Mr. Blackwood to the bunkhouse? He'll be staying with us for a while, helping with the ranch." William's face brightened. "Really? Can you ride horses? Do you have a gun? Can you teach me to rope like Miguel does?" Knox couldn't help smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. "Yes to all three, though the gun's just for protection, not for showing off. And I'll teach you to rope if your mother approves." Violet straightened. "We'll see. For now, just show Mr. Blackwood where to put his things. Then you have reading lessons with Aunt Catherine this afternoon." As William led Knox toward the bunkhouse, chattering excitedly, Knox glanced back at Violet. She stood on the porch watching them, her expression unreadable. Whatever she felt about his return, Knox knew one thing for certain: he wasn't leaving her to face Hollister alone. No matter how much she insisted she didn't need him. The bunkhouse was simple but clean, with 6 bunks, though only 2 showed signs of use. An elderly man with a white beard looked up from mending a bridle as they entered. "Hank, this is Mr. Blackwood," William announced importantly. "He's going to help with the cattle and teach me to rope." Hank squinted at Knox. "Blackwood, from the Circle K," Knox nodded. "Long time ago." The old man's weathered face cracked in a smile. "Well, heard you moved down Colorado way." He extended a gnarled hand. "Hank Wilson. Been working Preston land since before the missus was married." Knox shook his hand, recognizing a loyal employee when he saw one. "Good to meet you, Hank. Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us." "That we do. Miguel and I been trying, but there's just too much for 2 men, especially with my back acting up." Hank glanced at William. "Run along now, boy. Men need to talk." Once William had departed, Hank's expression turned serious. "You should know what you're getting into. Missus won't say it, but we're in trouble here. Hollister's squeezing hard." "I know about the loan," Knox said. Hank spat into a cup. "Ain't just the loan. Strange things been happening. Cattle found dead with no cause. Fences cut. 2 hands quit after being threatened in town." Knox's eyes narrowed. "Threatened by who?" "Them fellas that ride with Hollister, Bolton, and Reeves. Never caught him at it, but everyone knows." Hank leaned forward. "There's copper on the north end of this property." "Not much, maybe, but Hollister's got investors wanting to mine it." "Does Violet know?" "Missus knows, but won't sell on principle. Says her husband loved this land, wanted to build something for their boy." Hank studied Knox carefully. "Catherine sent for you, didn't she?" Knox nodded. "Good. Missus needs someone she can trust, even if she's too stubborn to admit it." Hank stood with a wince. "Come on. I'll introduce you to Miguel, then we've got cattle to move." The next few days fell into a rhythm of hard work from dawn until dusk. Knox, Hank, and Miguel, a skilled 17-year-old vaquero, began moving the cattle to higher pastures. Violet worked alongside them, proving she hadn't forgotten the riding and roping skills Knox had taught her years ago. They rarely spoke of personal matters. During the day, they discussed cattle, weather, and ranch operations. At night, Knox ate dinner with the others in the main house before retiring to the bunkhouse, watching Violet read to William or help him with simple arithmetic. On the fourth evening, after William had gone to bed, Knox found Violet on the porch, staring at account books by lamplight. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and the lines of fatigue around her eyes were pronounced. "You should rest," he said, leaning against the porch railing. She glanced up. "These figures won't add themselves. Mind if I look?" When she hesitated, he added, "I kept the books at the Morrison Ranch in Colorado for 5 years. After a moment, she handed him the ledger. Knox studied the neat columns of numbers, noting the careful economizing and the looming loan payment. "If we get top dollar for the herd, you'll still be short," he observed. "I know." Violet ran a hand through her hair. "I've written to James's parents in Denver, but they never approved of him marrying me. They haven't even come to see William since the funeral." Knox closed the book. "What about your father?" Violet's laugh was bitter. "Judge Kensington. He disowned me when I married James against his wishes. The last letter I received from him said I'd made my bed and should lie in it." Knox winced. Judge Kensington's stubborn pride had clearly not softened with age. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I chose this life." She looked out at the darkened landscape. "James was a good man, kind, gentle with William. He loved this land." Knox fought against the jealousy that rose at her words. James Preston had given Violet what Knox couldn't: stability, a family, a home. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. "After you left Wyoming." Violet was silent so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was distant, as if recalling a story that had happened to someone else. "Father sent me to my aunt in Boston, said I needed to forget my foolish infatuation with a penniless cowboy." She glanced at him. "I wrote to you." "For a while," Knox acknowledged. "Yes, for a while," Violet sighed. "Then Father showed me the newspaper announcement of your engagement to Elena Morrison." Knox stared at her, stunned. "What engagement?" "There was never the Morrison Ranch owner's daughter," Violet continued. "Father had business associates in Colorado who confirmed it, said you'd become foreman and were marrying into the family." "Violet, that never happened." Knox moved closer, willing her to believe him. "Elena Morrison was 16 years old when I started working there. I was a hand, not foreman. Her father would have shot me for even looking at her." Violet's expression wavered between doubt and hope. "But Father showed me the announcement. It had your name." "Then it was a different Knox Blackwood, or your father fabricated it." Knox took a deep breath. "I waited for your letters. When they stopped coming, I wrote to Catherine. She told me you were happily pursuing your studies and asked me not to contact you again." Violet's eyes widened. "Catherine would never, unless—" She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Unless Father intercepted her mail too. He was capable of it." They stared at each other, the weight of 7 years of misunderstanding hanging between them. "I met James a year later," Violet finally said. "He was kind when I needed kindness. I grew to love him in my way." Knox nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. She had married James Preston with a heart still wounded by what she believed was Knox's betrayal. "I'm sorry, Violet, for all of it." She stood abruptly, gathering her books. "It was a long time ago. We were different people." "Were we?" Knox asked softly. Their eyes met in the lamplight, and for a moment, Knox saw the 19-year-old girl who had raced him across meadows and dreamed of a future together. Then Violet's walls came back up. Good night, Knox. We have an early start tomorrow." As she disappeared into the house, Knox remained on the porch, piecing together the elaborate deception that had separated them. Judge Kensington had been determined to keep his daughter from marrying a ranch hand with no prospects, and he'd succeeded. Now, 7 years later, Knox had a chance to prove he was worthy of the woman he'd never stopped loving if she would let him. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Knox was mending a fence near the house when he spotted 3 riders approaching Catherine Kensington, Sheriff Thomas Bailey, and a stout woman he didn't recognize. Violet emerged from the house as they arrived, William at her side. "Catherine, is something wrong?" Catherine dismounted quickly. "Nothing's wrong. We've brought news and Martha Jenkins." The stout woman climbed awkwardly from her horse. "Mrs. Preston, begging your pardon for arriving unannounced." Sheriff Bailey tipped his hat to Violet, then nodded to Knox. "Blackwood, Sheriff." Knox had met Bailey briefly in town. When registering his firearm, a formality the sheriff insisted on for all newcomers. Bailey seemed competent and fair-minded, though clearly aware of the tensions surrounding the Preston ranch. "Martha has information about Hollister you need to hear," Catherine explained. Violet ushered everyone inside, sending William to help Miguel with the horses. Once they were seated in the modest parlor, Martha Jenkins twisted her handkerchief nervously. "I've worked as Mr. Hollister's housekeeper for 3 years," she began. "Yesterday, I was cleaning his study when I overheard him speaking with Mr. Bolton and that mining man from Denver." "Mining man?" Violet asked sharply. "Mr. Hargrove. He's been staying at the hotel for 2 weeks." Martha leaned forward. "They didn't know I was there. Mr. Hollister said he'd have the Preston property by August 1st one way or another, said the mining company would pay triple what the land is worth for cattle ranching." Sheriff Bailey cleared his throat. "Mrs. Jenkins came to me with this information this morning." "While overhearing a private conversation isn't evidence of wrongdoing, I thought you should be informed." "There's more," Martha continued. "Mr. Hollister told them if Mrs. Preston wouldn't sell willingly, they'd increase the pressure. Mr. Bolton laughed and said something about accidents happening all the time on ranches." Knox's hand clenched into a fist. "That explains the cut fences and dead cattle." Violet's face had gone pale. "Are you suggesting they might?" "I don't know what they're planning," the sheriff said carefully. "But I'd advise caution. Keep your people close to the house, especially after dark." "What about William?" Violet's voice trembled slightly. "He rides out with Miguel sometimes." Catherine reached for her sister's hand. "He should stay with me in town until this is resolved." "He'd enjoy being near the other children." Violet nodded slowly. "Yes, perhaps that would be best." After the sheriff and Martha departed, Catherine remained to help Violet pack William's things. The boy protested until Knox promised to teach him extra roping tricks when he returned. "It's just for a little while, partner," Knox assured him. "Like a vacation in town." As Catherine's wagon disappeared down the road with William waving from the back, Knox noticed tears in Violet's eyes. "He'll be safer there," he said gently. "I know." She wiped her eyes quickly. "I just hate that it's come to this. This is his home." "And it will remain his home," Knox promised. "We won't let Hollister take it." Violet looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since his arrival. "Why are you doing this, Knox? After everything that happened or didn't happen, as it turns out, why come back for a fight that isn't yours?" Knox met her gaze steadily. "You know why." Before she could respond, Hank called from the barn, "Riders coming. Looks like Hollister." Knox and Violet hurried to the front of the house. Sure enough, Hollister approached with Bolton and Reeves flanking him. This time they were accompanied by a 4th man expensively dressed with a city man's pallor. "Hargrove," Violet murmured. "The mining investor." Knox positioned himself beside her as the men dismounted. "Let me handle this." "It's my ranch," she replied firmly. Hollister affected surprise at finding Knox there. "Mr. Blackwood, still employed, I see. And where's the young master today?" "Visiting his aunt," Violet answered coolly. "What brings you here, Mr. Hollister?" "Our business meeting isn't scheduled until next week. I've brought someone I'd like you to meet." Hollister gestured to the well-dressed stranger. "Edward Hargrove of the Denver Mining Consortium. Mr. Hargrove has a proposition that might solve all your problems, Mrs. Preston." Hargrove stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Preston, I understand you're in a difficult position. My company is prepared to purchase your property for a very generous sum, enough to clear your debts and provide handsomely for your future." "My ranch isn't for sale," Violet replied. "Perhaps you should hear the figure before deciding," Hollister suggested. "Mr. Hargrove is offering $12,000. Knox couldn't help the low whistle that escaped him. The amount was indeed generous, nearly double what the ranch would fetch as cattle land. Violet's expression remained unchanged. "The Preston Ranch is not for sale at any price, gentlemen. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." Hargrove's smile faded. "Mrs. Preston, I don't think you understand. The copper deposits on your northern ridge make this land extremely valuable. You're sitting on a fortune that you can't access without mining equipment and expertise." "I understand perfectly," Violet countered. "I also understand that mining would destroy the grazing land, pollute our water, and turn this ranch into an industrial wasteland. My answer is no." Hollister's pleasant facade slipped. "Be reasonable, Violet. You can't possibly manage this place alone. The loan comes due in 7 weeks. Where will you find $8,000 by then?" "That's my concern, not yours," Violet said. Bolton, the larger of Hollister's men, spat on the ground. "Mighty stubborn for a woman about to lose everything." Knox stepped forward, hand hovering near his gun. "You're on Preston property. I suggest you watch your tone." Bolton's eyes narrowed. "Or what, Cowboy? Gentlemen, please." Hollister raised his hands placatingly. "We're here to negotiate, not quarrel." He turned to Violet. "Think of your son, Mrs. Preston. This offer would secure his future." "My son's future is here on the land his father loved," Violet replied. "Now I'll ask you once more to leave." Hargrove shook his head. "This is pointless." "I told you she wouldn't listen to reason." "She'll listen when she has no choice," Hollister muttered, then forced a smile. "Very well, Mrs. Preston. We'll respect your wishes today, but my offer won't remain open indefinitely. Think carefully about what's best for your son." As the men mounted their horses, Reeves lingered, eyeing the property. "Shame if anything happened to this place. Lot of accidents can happen on a ranch. Fires, stampedes, all kinds of danger for a woman alone." Knox moved toward him menacingly. "She's not alone," Reeves smirked. "For now." After they departed, Violet's composure finally broke. She sat heavily on the porch steps, hands shaking. "They're going to take everything, aren't they? If not by foreclosure, then by force." Knox sat beside her. "Not if I have anything to say about it. What can we do against men like that? They have money, influence. We have something they don't," Knox said. "People who care about this land and what happens to it." Violet looked at him skeptically. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning it's time to call in some favors," Knox replied. "Starting tomorrow." The next morning, Knox rode into town before dawn. His first stop was the telegraph office, where he sent wires to former colleagues in Colorado and Wyoming. Next came visits to neighboring ranchers' men who competed with the Preston Ranch, but maintained the code of the West that dictated helping neighbors against outside threats. By midday, Knox had secured promises of support from 3 neighboring ranches. The Morrison outfit would loan men for the cattle drive to market. The Barton spread would contribute hay if needed. Old Joe Freeman promised to spread the word among smaller ranchers about Hollister's tactics. At the general store, Knox encountered Sheriff Bailey. "Making the rounds, I see," the sheriff observed. Knox nodded. "People should know what Hollister's planning. Be careful, Blackwood. Hollister has friends on the town council, and enemies too, I'd wager." The sheriff didn't deny it. "Martha Jenkins found herself dismissed this morning." "No reason given." "Convenient timing," Knox remarked. "Indeed." Bailey lowered his voice. "I've written to the territorial marshal about Hollister's banking practices. Seems he's foreclosed on 6 properties in the last 2 years, all with mining potential, all subsequently sold to Hargrove's consortium. That suggests a pattern." "It does, but marshals move slowly and August 1st comes quickly." Bailey tipped his hat. "Give my regards to Mrs. Preston." Knox's final stop was Catherine's cottage, where William greeted him enthusiastically. The boy had been helping his aunt in the schoolhouse garden but dropped his tools immediately upon seeing Knox. "Did you bring Thunderbolt? Can I ride him? Is Mama coming to get me today?" Knox smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Not today, partner. Your Mama's busy getting ready for the cattle drive." He glanced at Catherine. "How's he settling in?" "Like he's been here forever," Catherine replied. "He's made friends with the Cooper boys next door." While William ran to fetch his sword to show Knox, Catherine's expression grew serious. "I heard about Hollister's visit yesterday. Martha Jenkins is staying with me now. She's afraid to remain in town." "Smart woman," Knox said. "How's Violet handling everything?" Catherine studied him. "She's stronger than she appears, though she seems different since you arrived." "Different how?" "More like the Violet I remember from before." Catherine hesitated. "She loved you, Knox, deeply. When she believed you'd moved on with another woman, it nearly destroyed her." Knox's jaw tightened. "Her father has a lot to answer for." "Yes, he does," Catherine sighed. "Judge Kensington was determined that Violet would marry someone who could provide the life he thought she deserved. He never understood what she truly wanted." "And what was that?" Catherine smiled sadly. "Freedom. Adventure. Love without conditions. Everything you represented." William returned with his wooden sword, and Knox spent the next hour teaching him basic roping techniques, using a clothesline in Catherine's backyard. The boy was a quick study, his enthusiasm reminding Knox painfully of Violet at 19. As Knox prepared to leave, Catherine pressed a package into his hands. Violet's favorite apple cake and a book for those long evenings. She always loved poetry. Knox raised an eyebrow. "Playing matchmaker, Catherine," she smiled innocently. "Simply being hospitable to my sister's employee." The ride back to the ranch took Knox past Hollister's imposing house on the edge of town. As he passed, he noticed Bolton and Reeves loading rifles into saddlebags outside the stables. The men spotted him and abruptly stopped their work, watching as he rode by. Knox returned their stares evenly, hand resting on his holstered gun. The message was clear on both sides. Neither was backing down. At the ranch, Knox found Violet and Hank sorting cattle in the north pasture. Miguel rode up from the creek, reporting that the southern fence line was secure. "Town's buzzing with talk," Knox told them as they rode toward the house. "Word of Hollister's mining plans is spreading. Most folks don't like the idea of their valley being turned into a mining camp." "Public opinion won't pay my loan," Violet replied practically. "No, but it might buy us time." Knox described his arrangements with neighboring ranchers. "If we can get the cattle to market sooner and fetch a better price, we might have enough to make a partial payment. Hollister would have a hard time foreclosing if you can show good faith." Violet considered this. "The cattle aren't at ideal weight yet. Morrison's offering supplemental feed, Knox said. 3 weeks of that and they'll be ready. That's cutting it close to the deadline. Sometimes close is all you get, Knox replied. That evening, after dinner, Knox presented Catherine's gifts. Violet's expression softened at the sight of the cake. Catherine remembers everything, she murmured, then noticed the book. Wordsworth, I haven't read poetry in years. Your sister thought you might enjoy it again. Violet ran her fingers over the leather binding. James never cared for poetry, said it was impractical. They sat on the porch as twilight descended, sharing the cake in comfortable silence. Eventually, Violet opened the book, reading aloud in the fading light. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, so was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. Her voice faltered on the final lines. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Knox watched her in the gathering darkness, remembering how she'd once recited Tennyson to him under Wyoming stars, her voice full of passion and dreams. You still read beautifully, he said quietly. Violet closed the book. Poetry seems frivolous now, a luxury from another life. It's not frivolous to remember beauty exists, Knox replied. Even in difficult times, especially then. She studied him in the twilight. You've changed, Knox. You're steadier somehow. 7 years of responsibility does that to a man. Tell me about Colorado, she said suddenly. Were you happy there? Knox considered the question. Content, maybe. The Morrisons treated me fairly. I learned a lot, saved some money, but happy. No, not exactly. Because of me. Her question was barely audible. Partly, Knox admitted. Mostly because I was running from memories instead of building something of my own. And now I'm exactly where I need to be. The certainty in his voice hung between them, neither acknowledging nor denying its implications. After a moment, Violet stood. We should rest. Dawn comes early. Knox remained on the porch long after she'd gone inside, listening to the night sounds and planning their next moves against Hollister. Whatever happened with Violet, whether she could ever forgive the past and consider a future with him, he was determined to save her ranch. He owed her that much, at least. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity to the Preston ranch. With help from the Morrison outfit, they began preparing the cattle for early market. The neighboring Barton ranch sent hay and grain to supplement the herd's diet. Miguel's uncle arrived with 2 nephews to help with the roundup. Hollister and his men made themselves scarce, but remained a constant threat. Twice, they found fences cut on the north boundary. Once, someone spooked the cattle near the creek, causing a small stampede that fortunately resulted in no injuries or losses. Knox took to patrolling the property at night, often accompanied by Miguel or one of his cousins. Violet objected initially, insisting she take shifts as well, but Knox persuaded her that managing the ranch during the day required her full attention and rest. William visited on Sundays with Catherine, his presence brightening the increasingly tense atmosphere. The boy was fascinated by the preparations for the cattle drive and begged to be included. When you're older, Violet promised. For now, you're helping most by staying safe with Aunt Catherine. 3 weeks before the loan deadline, Knox received a telegram from his former employer in Colorado. Arriving July 15 with buyers from Denver stop, bringing 6 hands stop hold best cattle stop. Knox showed the message to Violet as they inspected the herd. James Morrison knows cattle buyers all over the territory. If anyone can get us top dollar, it's him. Hope flickered in Violet's eyes for the first time in weeks. Even with the best price, we'll still be short. I've been thinking about that, Knox said carefully. I have savings. Not enough for the whole amount, but maybe enough to cover the shortfall. Violet stopped walking. I can't take your money, Knox. Consider it an investment, he replied. I've been looking to buy into a ranch for years. The Preston operation is a good bet. You want to be my partner. After all this is over, her tone was skeptical. Knox met her gaze. I want to help you keep what's yours, the rest we can figure out later. Before Violet could respond, Miguel galloped toward them, his expression urgent. Riders coming, many men. Knox's hand went to his gun as they hurried toward the house. How many? 8, maybe 10, Miguel reported. Not Hollister's men. Different. As they reached the yard, the riders appeared on the ridge trail-worn cowboys led by a stocky man with a silver beard. Knox broke into a grin. Morrison, you're early. James Morrison dismounted with the ease of a man half his age. Figured you could use the help sooner rather than later. He tipped his hat to Violet. Mrs. Preston, sorry about the unannounced arrival. Violet smiled warmly. Any friend of Knox's is welcome here, Mr. Morrison, especially one bringing cattle buyers. They'll be along in a few days, Morrison explained. Thought we'd get the herd sorted first, identify your prime stock. He gestured to his men. Brought my best hands. They'll bunk wherever you can put them. The bunkhouse is mostly empty, Violet said. We'll make room. Morrison's arrival changed the dynamic at the ranch dramatically. With 8 experienced hands helping, the cattle were sorted and readied for market in half the time. Morrison himself inspected every animal, marking the best specimens for the Denver buyers. You've done well with this herd, he told Violet. James Preston knew his cattle. He learned from his father, Violet replied. The Preston men have been ranching for 3 generations. It shows. Morrison glanced at Knox. Blackwood tells me you've had trouble with the local banker. Violet's expression tightened. Mr. Hollister has his eyes on our property for mining interests. Seen it before, Morrison nodded. Mining money is changing the territory, not always for the better. That evening, as the expanded crew ate dinner at long tables set up in the yard, Sheriff Bailey rode in with Catherine and William. Thought you should know, Bailey said without preamble. Hollister's hired 4 more men, rough types from over Cheyenne Way. Knox and Morrison exchanged glances. Expecting trouble? Morrison asked. Planning it, more like, the sheriff replied grimly. Word is they've been asking about your cattle drive plans, when you're moving, which route. Violet paled. They wouldn't dare attack a legal cattle drive. Wouldn't they? Bailey sighed. I've got no legal grounds to stop them from riding where they please. Just wanted you forewarned. Catherine put her arm around William, who was listening with wide eyes. Perhaps we should take William back to town. No, Violet said suddenly. If they're watching the ranch, I want William here, protected by our men. She looked at Morrison. If you're willing. My boys and I didn't ride all this way to leave a woman and child undefended, Morrison assured her. We'll set watches through the night. After the others had retired, Knox found Violet in the parlor studying a map of the territory. We could take the western route, she said without looking up. It's longer but follows the river most of the way, less chance of ambush. Knox examined the map. More chance of losing cattle in the river crossings, and the extra days would put us dangerously close to the loan deadline. Then what do you suggest? We send a decoy drive, Knox said. Split the herd. Send the prime cattle with half the men by the eastern route while the rest take the standard trail, making plenty of noise and dust. Violet considered this. Hollister's men would follow the larger group. That's the idea. Knox traced the eastern route on the map. It's rougher terrain, but with fewer cattle and good hands, we could make good time. Morrison and I would go with the prime stock. You'd stay here with William and enough men to protect the ranch. No, Violet said firmly. I'm going with the prime cattle. This is my ranch, my responsibility." Knox recognized the determined set of her jaw. "It's dangerous, Violet. So is losing everything my husband built for our son." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm going, Knox, either with you or without you." Knox knew arguing was pointless. "Then Catherine stays here with William and at least 4 men." Violet nodded. "Morrison can oversee the decoy drive. Miguel knows these lands better than anyone. He should guide our group." As they worked out the details, Knox marveled at Violet's tactical thinking. The shy, poetry-loving girl he'd known had become a strategist, a fighter. He'd always known she had strength, but seeing it in action stirred something profound in him: pride, admiration, and an even deeper love than he'd felt 7 years ago. When they finally had a plan, Violet straightened from the map with a wince, rubbing her neck. "You should rest," Knox said gently. "So should you," she replied. "You've been taking night watches for weeks." "I'm used to it." Violet studied him in the lamplight. "Why did you really come back, Knox? And don't say it was just Catherine's letter." Knox considered his words carefully. "When I heard you were in trouble, nothing could have kept me away. Not pride, not the past, nothing. Even though you thought I'd chosen another man. Even after 7 years of silence, even then." Knox met her gaze directly. "Some feelings don't die, Violet, they just wait." The vulnerability in her eyes nearly undid him. For a moment he thought she might step toward him, might bridge the careful distance they'd maintained. Instead, she gathered the maps. "We should tell Morrison our plan in the morning," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "The cattle drive leaves in 2 days." Knox nodded, accepting the change of subject. "Get some sleep, Violet. Tomorrow will be busy." As she passed him on her way upstairs, she paused. "Knox, thank you for coming back. For everything." Before he could respond, she continued up the stairs, leaving Knox alone with the echo of her words and the hope they kindled. Dawn on departure day brought organized chaos to the Preston ranch. The larger portion of the herd, nearly 200 head of average cattle, was readied for the standard route with Morrison and 4 of his men. The prime stock, 60 of the best animals, would take the eastern route with Knox, Violet, Miguel, 2 Morrison hands, and Hank, who insisted he was fit enough despite his back troubles. Catherine would remain at the ranch with William, protected by Miguel's uncle and cousins. The sheriff had promised to check on them daily. William was distraught at being separated from his mother. "Why can't I come with you? I can ride now." Violet knelt before her son. "This is a dangerous job, William. I need you to be brave and stay with Aunt Catherine. Can you do that for me?" The boy's lower lip trembled, but he nodded solemnly. "Will you bring me something from town?" "A new book," Violet promised. "And perhaps Mr. Blackwood will find you a proper rope of your own." William brightened at this. "Really? My very own lasso?" Knox smiled. "A junior size. Just right for practicing." As the decoy drive departed with much noise and dust deliberately drawing attention, Knox's smaller group slipped away quietly, heading east through a narrow canyon that would shield them from distant observers. Violet rode confidently beside Knox, dressed in practical riding clothes rather than a dress. With her hair braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, she looked every inch the capable rancher. "Morrison will give us a day's head start before making camp," Knox reminded her. "By then, we should be well ahead and on terrain Hollister's men don't know." "If they're watching at all," Violet said hopefully. Knox didn't share her optimism. "Hollister's invested too much to give up now. He'll have men watching both the ranch and the trails." The eastern route proved as challenging as expected. The narrow path hugged steep hillsides and crossed rocky streams. By midday, they'd made good progress without incident, stopping in a sheltered valley to rest the cattle and horses. As Miguel and the others tended the herd, Knox scouted the ridge above them, watching for any sign of pursuit. Violet joined him, bringing jerky and water. "See anything?" she asked. Knox shook his head. "Not yet. Doesn't mean they're not out there." They sat in companionable silence, surveying the rugged landscape. The July sun beat down mercilessly, but a breeze from the mountains brought occasional relief. "I'd forgotten how beautiful it is," Violet said softly. "When you're working the ranch day in and day out, you sometimes forget to look up." Knox understood completely. "That's why I used to take you riding at dawn. Everything looks different in that first light, like the world is being created all over again." Violet smiled at the memory. "You taught me to see Wyoming through new eyes. I'd spent years at finishing school, learning how to be a proper lady, only to return and realize I didn't know my own home anymore. And I was the inappropriate ranch hand who corrupted you with dawn rides and poetry under the stars," Knox teased. "You weren't inappropriate," Violet corrected. "You were exactly what I needed." Her smile faded. "My father never understood that. Would he understand now, if he knew what you've built here, how you fought for your son's inheritance?" Violet considered this. "Perhaps. Though Judge Kensington rarely admits he's wrong." She glanced at Knox. "Did you ever want to confront him after what he did to separate us?" "Every day for years," Knox admitted. "Then less often. Eventually, I just wanted to understand why he thought I wasn't good enough for you." "It wasn't about you," Violet said quietly. "It was about his vision for my life. Harvard-educated lawyers and Boston society, respectability, security. And now, what's your vision?" Violet gazed across the valley. "A safe home for William, a profitable ranch, maybe." She hesitated. "Maybe someone to share it with who understands what it means to love this land." Before Knox could respond, Miguel appeared on the trail below, signaling urgently. Knox raised his spyglass, scanning the direction Miguel pointed. "Riders," he reported grimly. "At least 4 following our trail." "Hollister's men?" Violet asked, standing quickly. "Can't tell from this distance, but they're moving fast and not trying to hide it." Knox pocketed the spyglass. "We need to move. Now." They hurried back to the herd, quickly organizing the cattle to continue their journey. Hank groaned as he remounted, his back clearly troubling him. "You all right, old-timer?" Knox asked. "Been better, been worse," Hank grumbled. "Won't slow you down." Miguel rode up, his young face serious. "There is another way, a path my grandfather showed me. Very difficult, only for emergencies." "This qualifies," Knox said. "Lead on." Miguel guided them off the main trail into what appeared to be impenetrable brush. Behind it lay a narrow game trail that wound steeply upward. Driving the cattle this way proved challenging. The animals balked at the unfamiliar path, and the terrain forced them to proceed single file in places. By sunset, they'd gained significant elevation and put several miles between themselves and their pursuers. Miguel led them to a small plateau with a spring-fed pool, an ideal spot to rest the herd overnight. "We will be safe here," Miguel assured them. "The path behind us is too narrow for men to approach quietly, and there is only one way up." Knox organized watch shifts, taking the first himself. As darkness fell, the others settled around a small, carefully shielded fire. Violet checked on Hank, who lay on his bedroll with a pained expression. "Back seizing up again?" she asked sympathetically. "Nothing to fuss over," Hank insisted, though his grimace belied his words. Violet dug in her saddlebag, producing a small jar. "Catherine's liniment. It helped James when his old cavalry injury acted up." While Violet tended to Hank, Knox patrolled the perimeter of their camp, rifle in hand. The moon was nearly full, illuminating the landscape in silver light. From their elevated position, he could see for miles, including the pinprick of a campfire far below. Their pursuers had stopped for the night. Later, when the others slept, Violet joined Knox at his lookout position. She handed him a cup of coffee from the fire. "Any sign of them?" she asked. "They've made camp about 3 miles back," Knox replied. "They'll have a hard time following us tomorrow if Miguel's route is as challenging as he says." Violet wrapped her coat tighter against the night chill. "I've been thinking about what happens after this if we succeed in paying Hollister, if the ranch is safe." Knox waited, not wanting to interrupt whatever she was working toward saying. "I meant what I said earlier," she continued, "about wanting someone who understands this life. Who loves it as much as I do." She looked at him directly. "I thought that person was gone from my life forever." Knox set down his coffee. "Violet, please let me finish." She took a deep breath. "When James died, I thought my heart was done with love. That I'd had my chance, built a good life, and now my only purpose was securing William's future. Then you rode back into my life, and everything I thought I knew about myself came into question." "What are you saying?" Knox asked, barely daring to hope. "I'm saying that feelings don't just wait, Knox. Sometimes they hide even from ourselves." Violet stepped closer. "I love James. He was a good husband and father, but what I felt for you, what I still feel, it's different. It always has been." Knox reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers twined with his, warm and certain. "I've loved you since I was 25 years old," Knox said softly. "That never changed, not for a single day." In the moonlight, Violet's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "We lost so much time. Or maybe we needed that time," Knox suggested, "to become the people who could find each other again." Violet smiled through her tears. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between Colorado and Wyoming, I suppose." Her laugh was soft and sweet, a sound Knox had carried in his memory for 7 years. When she stepped into his arms, it felt like coming home after a very long journey. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative with the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Then it deepened. Years of longing and loss transformed into rediscovered passion. When they finally parted, Violet rested her head against his chest. "We should focus on saving the ranch, on getting through tomorrow safely." "We will," Knox promised, "and then we'll figure out the rest together." The moment was interrupted by Miguel's soft approach. "My turn to watch," he reminded them. Knox nodded, reluctantly stepping back from Violet. "Keep a sharp eye. I don't trust how easily they followed us today." As they returned to camp, Violet whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, Knox, I'm glad you came back." Knox squeezed her hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be the hardest day yet." Dawn brought fog rolling across the plateau, limiting visibility to mere yards. Knox consulted with Miguel, who seemed concerned. "The path down is dangerous in fog," the young man explained. "Very steep. Cattle could fall. And waiting gives those men time to catch up," Knox noted. Hank, moving stiffly but determined, joined their discussion. "Fog works both ways. They can't see us either." Violet considered their options. "We push on. Slowly, carefully, the fog will burn off as the day warms." They began their descent with extreme caution. Miguel led, with Violet and Knox guiding the nervous cattle down the treacherous path. The Morrison hands brought up the rear, watching for pursuit. By mid-morning, the fog had indeed begun to lift, revealing a dizzying drop on one side of the narrow trail. The cattle, sensing danger, moved with uncharacteristic docility, following the lead steer's cautious progress. As they rounded a sharp bend, Miguel suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. Knox rode forward to join him. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Miguel pointed to the path ahead, where fresh boot prints were visible in the damp earth. Someone has been here. Recently. Knox dismounted to examine the tracks. Heading up, at least 2 men. Impossible, Miguel whispered. No one knows this path except my family. Someone does now, Knox said grimly. He turned to Violet, who had joined them. We might be riding into an ambush. Violet's face set with determination. Options? Limited, Knox admitted. We can't go back up, not with the cattle, and the trail's too narrow to turn around. So we proceed, Violet decided. But ready for trouble, Knox nodded. Miguel, ride ahead carefully, see what's waiting. Hank, get the Morrison boys to secure the rear. No one sneaks up behind us. As Miguel disappeared around the bend, Knox drew Violet aside. If there's shooting, you get down and stay down. No heroics. Same goes for you, she replied firmly. They waited tensely for Miguel's return. When he reappeared minutes later, his expression was grim. 2 men, armed, waiting where the path widens near the bottom, he reported. They have horses hidden in the trees, blocking our exit, Knox concluded. Likely while the others catch up from behind. We're trapped, Violet whispered. Not quite. Knox studied the terrain. Miguel, is there any way to bypass them? Any fork in the path? Miguel shook his head, then hesitated. There is no path, but my grandfather once showed me where the mountain lions descend. It is very steep, only for desperate times. This qualifies, Violet said, echoing Knox's words from the day before. Can the cattle manage it? Knox asked. Not all, Miguel admitted. But you and the Senora could with the horses. Knox understood immediately. You're suggesting we split up. Violet and I take the mountain lion route while you and the others continue with the cattle as a distraction. Miguel nodded. The cattle are what they expect to find. They will not look for 2 riders on a different path. It's too dangerous, Violet protested. I won't leave my men to face Hollister's thugs alone. It's our best chance, Knox argued. You and I can reach town, bring the sheriff back with a posse, catch Hollister's men in the act of attacking a legal cattle drive. Hank joined them, having overheard. He's right, Mrs. You 2 go for help. We'll keep the herd moving slow, buy you time. After a moment's internal struggle, Violet nodded. Be careful, all of you. Miguel led them to a barely visible game trail branching off the main path. It is there, very steep. Your horses must be sure-footed. They are, Knox assured him. He clasped the young man's shoulder. Keep everyone safe. We'll be back with help as soon as possible. As they prepared to separate, Violet embraced Hank. Don't be a hero, old friend. Never been accused of that before, Hank chuckled. Don't you worry about us. Just get to town in one piece. The path Miguel had indicated proved even more treacherous than described, a near vertical descent through loose shale and scrub brush. They dismounted, leading their horses carefully down the precarious slope. Some mountain lion route, Knox muttered as his boot dislodged a shower of stones. More like a death wish. Violet managed a tight smile. Remind me to have a word with Miguel's grandfather about his definition of path. Despite the danger, they made good progress. The route curved away from the main trail, eventually joining a dry creek bed that wound toward the valley floor. By noon, they had descended to safer terrain, able to mount their horses and proceed at a faster pace. If we push hard, we can reach town by sunset, Knox calculated. Sheriff Bailey could organize a posse and be back at the mountain by dawn. Violet nodded, her face etched with worry. I hope Miguel and the others can hold out that long. They rode in silence for a time, picking up speed as the terrain allowed. The creek bed gradually widened, joining a proper stream bed with occasional pools of water where they stopped briefly to rest the horses. As they prepared to continue, Knox froze at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Quick, into those trees. They concealed themselves in a dense stand of pines just as two riders appeared upstream. Knox recognized them immediately. Bolton and Reeves, Hollister's men. They must have split their forces, Violet whispered. Some to ambush the cattle, others to patrol the lowlands. Knox nodded, watching as the men paused to water their horses. They're blocking our route to town. There must be another way, Violet murmured. Knox studied the terrain. If we follow this stream southeast instead of south, we might be able to circle around them. It's longer but safer. What about Miguel and the others? We can't help them if we're caught ourselves, Knox reasoned. Come on while those two are distracted. They retreated quietly, then urged their horses into the water, following the stream eastward to mask their tracks. The detour added hours to their journey, forcing them to navigate unfamiliar territory as the sun began its westward descent. By late afternoon, Knox estimated they were still at least 3 hours from town. We won't make it before dark, he admitted. Violet pointed to a plume of smoke visible in the distance. That might be a homestead. Perhaps they could send someone to town while we continue toward the mountain. The smoke led them to a small farm nestled in a protected valley. A weathered sign proclaimed it the Jensen place. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, rifle ready. State your business, he called. Knox raised his hands to show they meant no harm. My name's Knox Blackwood. This is Violet Preston. We're in trouble and need help. The man lowered his rifle slightly. Preston. From the cattle ranch north of Whispering Pines. Yes, Violet confirmed. And you are Eric Jensen. My wife and I homesteaded here 5 years back. He studied them warily. What kind of trouble? They quickly explained the situation. Jensen listened gravely, then invited them inside where his wife, Martha, provided coffee while they discussed options. I know Hollister, Jensen growled. Tried to foreclose on the Wilkins place last year, got their land for pennies on the dollar. He won't get mine, Violet said firmly. Jensen nodded approvingly. I can ride for the sheriff. My boy can guide you back toward your men. He knows every trail in these hills. Relief washed over Violet. We'd be very grateful. Jensen's teenage son, Thomas, proved as knowledgeable as promised. While his father rode for town, Thomas led Knox and Violet along a series of hidden trails that wound back toward the mountain. Pa and I hunt these woods every fall, the boy explained. There's an old trapper's cabin up ahead where you can rest the horses before the final climb. The cabin was little more than a shelter, a single room with a stone fireplace and rough plank floor, but it offered a place to rest and regroup as darkness fell. We should continue at first light, Knox decided. It's too dangerous to navigate those trails in the dark. Violet paced the small space anxiously. Miguel and the others could be in danger now. Miguel's smart, Knox reminded her. He'll keep them moving slowly, avoid confrontation if possible. Thomas prepared a simple meal from supplies in his saddlebags, then announced he would sleep in the lean-to outside with the horses. Give you folks some privacy, he said with the directness of youth. Alone in the cabin, Knox built a small fire to ward off the mountain chill. Violet sat before it, staring into the flames. We're so close, she said softly. So close to saving everything, the ranch, William's inheritance, yet it could all fall apart tomorrow. Knox sat beside her. It won't. We've come too far. She looked at him, the firelight casting warm shadows across her face. How can you be so certain? Because I've seen you fight for what matters, Knox replied. And because this time you're not fighting alone. Violet leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. I was alone for so long. Even with James, he was kind, but he never truly understood why the land mattered to me, why I couldn't be satisfied with being just a rancher's wife. And why is that? Knox asked gently. Because this land is part of me, she answered. The openness, the challenge of it. The freedom. She looked up at him. You understood that from the beginning. I saw it in you the first time we rode together, Knox agreed. The way you came alive under that big Wyoming sky. Violet's hand found his. I never stopped loving you, Knox, even when I thought you'd forgotten me. Even when I built a life with James, there was always a part of my heart that remembered what we had. Knox brushed a strand of hair from her face. If we succeed tomorrow, when we succeed, what happens next? I don't know exactly, Violet admitted, but I know I want you beside me. Helping me run the ranch, raise William. Building something together the way we once dreamed. Is that a proposal, Mrs. Preston? Knox asked with a smile. Violet laughed softly. Perhaps it is, Mr. Blackwood, though I believe tradition suggests you should be the one asking. Knox took both her hands in his. Violet Kensington Preston, when this is over, when your ranch is secure and your son's future protected, will you consider becoming Violet Blackwood? Her answer was a kiss that spoke of 7 years of separation, of rediscovered love, and of hope for the future. As the fire burned low, they held each other, sharing whispered plans and promises until sleep finally claimed them. Dawn broke clear and cold. Thomas was already tending the horses when Knox and Violet emerged from the cabin. Pa should have reached town last night, the boy assured them. Sheriff Bailey will be gathering men. They'll be coming up the main trail by now. Then we go up the mountain, Knox decided. Meet our men coming down, help them if needed. The climb was arduous but faster than their descent had been. Thomas guided them along game trails that switchbacked up the mountainside, occasionally stopping to study tracks or listen for sounds of their companions. By mid-morning, they had reached an overlook that provided a view of the main trail below. Knox used his spyglass to scan for signs of movement. There, he said suddenly. About half a mile down, the herd is moving very slowly. I can see Miguel at the lead. Violet took the spyglass. They're bunched too tightly, and where are the Morrison hands? As if in answer, the crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley. Then another. Ambush, Knox said grimly. He turned to Thomas. How quickly can we reach them? There's a cut-off trail just ahead, the boy replied. Drop straight down to the main path. They rode hard for the cutoff, then descended as rapidly as safety allowed. The sounds of gunfire grew louder as they approached, sporadic shots rather than sustained fighting. They're pinned down, Knox assessed. Hollister's men are probably trying to scatter the herd, create confusion. As they reached the main trail, they found Hank sheltering behind a boulder, rifle ready. His face lit with relief at the sight of them. About time you showed up, he called. We've got trouble. Knox and Violet dismounted, securing their horses before joining Hank. Thomas remained with the animals, keeping them calm. What's the situation? Knox demanded. 4 of Hollister's men up ahead blocking the trail, Hank reported. 2 more behind us. They started shooting about an hour ago, trying to spook the cattle. Miguel and the Morrison boys are keeping the herd together, but we're stuck. Anyone hurt? Violet asked anxiously. Just scratches so far. They're firing warning shots, trying to make us abandon the cattle. Hank's expression darkened. It's Hollister's game, make it look like we couldn't manage the drive, force you to sell at a loss. The sheriff's coming, Knox informed him. Jensen rode for town last night. Bailey should be on his way with a posse. If we can hold out that long, Hank muttered. A bullet struck the rock above them, showering them with stone chips. Knox pulled Violet lower. We need to reach Miguel and the others, he said. Consolidate our position. Hank pointed to a ravine running parallel to the trail. That gully provides some cover. If you're fast, you can make it. Knox turned to Violet. Stay here with Hank. Not a chance, she replied firmly. My men, my cattle, my fight. There was no time to argue. Together, they crawled to the edge of the ravine, then slid down into its relative protection. Crouching low, they worked their way forward until they reached Miguel and the Morrison hands, who had created a defensive position among fallen logs and boulders. Miguel's face showed relief and surprise. "Senora, we thought you were going for help." "Help is coming," Violet assured him. "We need to hold this position until the sheriff arrives." One of Morrison's men, a weathered cowboy named Davis, spat tobacco juice. "Been holding for an hour already. These boys ain't serious fighters, just trying to scare us off." "Hollister won't want bloodshed if he can avoid it," Knox agreed. "Too many questions afterward. He wants this to look like a business failure, not a theft." A volley of shots interrupted their conference, forcing everyone to take cover. When the firing stopped, a voice called from the rocks above. "Preston, you're outgunned and surrounded. Send the woman out to talk terms." Knox recognized Bolton's voice. "That's not happening," he shouted back. "Sheriff's on his way with a posse. You boys might want to consider if Hollister's paying you enough to hang." Silence followed this announcement. Knox could imagine the men conferring, weighing their options. Finally, Bolton called again. "We just want the cattle. Let us drive them back to town and nobody gets hurt." "Those cattle belong to Mrs. Preston," Knox responded. "You touch them, it's rustling, and that's a hanging offense in Wyoming territory." More silence. Then a single shot rang out, striking a tree near their position, a warning, not an attack. "They're getting nervous," Davis observed. "Thinking about their necks." "Good," Knox said. "The longer we can keep them talking, the better chance the sheriff has of reaching us." Violet checked her pocket watch. If Jensen reached town last night and Bailey left at dawn, they could be here within the hour. The standoff continued, with occasional exchanges of gunfire but no concentrated attack. Hollister's men seemed content to keep them pinned down rather than risk a frontal assault. As the morning wore on, Knox noticed the cattle growing increasingly restless. "They need water," Miguel noted. "And the day grows hot. If we lose cattle to thirst, it's as bad as losing them to rustlers," Violet worried. Knox studied the terrain. "There's a creek about 50 yards east of our position, if we could move the herd there." "Under fire?" Davis asked skeptically. "We create a diversion," Knox suggested. "Something to draw their attention while we move the cattle." Before they could develop this plan further, the distant sound of multiple riders approaching from below reached them. Everyone tensed, weapons ready. "Could be more of Hollister's men," Hank warned. Knox crawled to a position where he could see down the trail. After a moment, he broke into a grin. "It's Bailey, and he's brought half the town with him." The relief was palpable as the sheriff's posse came into view, at least 15 armed men riding hard up the trail. At their appearance, Hollister's men fired a few desultory shots, then began retreating. "Hold your fire," Sheriff Bailey called as he approached. "Unless they shoot first." The standoff dissolved quickly. 2 of Hollister's men surrendered immediately. The others, including Bolton and Reeves, attempted to flee but found escape routes blocked by members of the posse who had circled behind them. Within 30 minutes, all 6 attackers were disarmed and under arrest. Bailey dismounted, approaching Knox and Violet. "Sorry we couldn't get here sooner. Had to gather men, and these mountain trails aren't easy." "You're right on time, Sheriff," Violet said warmly. "You've saved my cattle and possibly our lives." "Thank Jensen," Bailey replied. Man rode into town like the devil himself was chasing him. He glanced at the captured men. "Bolton's already talking. Says Hollister paid them to disrupt the drive, make it look like an accident or incompetence." "Will it be enough to charge Hollister?" Knox asked. Bailey nodded grimly. "Between this and what Martha Jenkins overheard, we've got him. Territorial Marshal's been notified. Hollister will face charges of conspiracy at minimum." With the immediate danger past, they turned their attention to the cattle. The animals were thirsty and stressed, but otherwise unharmed. Bailey assigned 4 of his men to assist with moving the herd to water and continuing the drive to town. "The rest of us will escort these fellows to jail," he said, indicating the prisoners. "I imagine you'll want to be present when we arrest Hollister." "Wouldn't miss it," Knox assured him. The remainder of the cattle drive proceeded without incident. By late afternoon, they reached gentler terrain, and by evening the lights of Whispering Pines were visible in the valley below. As they made camp for the final night on the trail, Violet found a quiet moment with Knox by the fire. "Tomorrow we'll know if we've succeeded," she said softly. "If the buyers Morrison arranged will pay enough." Knox took her hand. "Whatever happens, we faced this together, and we'll face whatever comes next the same way." "Together," Violet agreed, leaning against him. "The way it was always meant to be." Morning brought clear skies and renewed determination as they drove the cattle into town. Word of the attempted rustling and Hollister's arrest had spread rapidly. Townspeople lined the streets, watching as the prime Preston stock was herded into the holding pens near the stockyards. Catherine waited there with William, who broke away to run to his mother the moment he spotted her. "Mama, did you catch the bad men? Sheriff Bailey said you were very brave." Violet embraced her son tightly. "We all were brave, especially Mr. Blackwood." William turned to Knox with undisguised admiration. "Did you shoot anyone? Mr. Jensen said there was a gunfight on the mountain." "No shooting required," Knox assured him, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just a lot of loud talking." Catherine hugged her sister. "Hollister's in jail. The territorial marshal arrived this morning to take statements. The whole town's talking about nothing else." "And the buyers?" Violet asked anxiously. "Waiting at the hotel," Catherine replied. "Mr. Morrison is with them now." The cattle sale proceeded better than they had dared hope. Morrison had brought 2 buyers who competed against each other, driving the price higher than expected. By mid-afternoon, the deal was concluded. 60 prime cattle sold for a sum that, combined with Violet's savings, would cover the loan with a small margin to spare. "James would be proud," Morrison told Violet as they left the bank, loan papers marked paid in full in her hand. "You've saved his legacy for your son." "I had help," Violet acknowledged, glancing at Knox. "More than I deserved, perhaps." As they stepped onto the street, they were approached by Martha Jenkins, who had been staying with Catherine. "Mrs. Preston, have you heard the latest, Mr. Hollister has been removed as bank president. The board of directors appointed Mr. Whitman as interim manager, and he's reviewing all of Hollister's foreclosures." This news spread ripples of excitement through the town. Hollister had made many enemies during his tenure, and his downfall was cause for celebration among those who had suffered from his predatory practices. That evening, a spontaneous gathering formed at the Whispering Pines Hotel. Morrison and his men were preparing to return to Colorado, and the townspeople wished to thank them and celebrate Hollister's arrest. The dining room overflowed with well-wishers, many stopping to congratulate Violet on saving her ranch. As the celebration continued, Knox found a quiet moment with William, presenting him with the promised rope. "It's sized just for you," Knox explained, showing the boy how to hold it. "We'll practice when we get back to the ranch." William looked up at him curiously. "Are you coming back with us?" "Mama said you might stay." Knox chose his words carefully. "Would you like it if I stayed?" The boy considered this seriously. "Yes, you make Mama smile, and you know about horses and cattle and fighting bad guys." "All important qualifications," Knox agreed solemnly. "Did you know my pa?" William asked suddenly. "No, I didn't have that honor," Knox replied, "but I hear he was a good man who loved you and your mother very much." William nodded. Mama says he's watching over us from heaven. Do you think he'd mind if you stayed at our ranch? Knox felt a lump form in his throat at the boy's innocent question. I think your father would want your mother to be happy and for you to have someone to teach you about horses and cattle. This seemed to satisfy William, who turned his attention back to his new rope, practicing the wrist motion Knox had demonstrated. Later, as the celebration wound down, Knox found Violet on the hotel's side porch, gazing at the stars. The same stars, he thought, that had witnessed their first declarations of love 7 years ago. Quite a day, he remarked, joining her at the railing. Quite a week, she corrected with a smile. Sometimes I can't believe it's over the threat, the fear. Not over, Knox said, just beginning. The next chapter. Violet turned to face him. I've been thinking about that next chapter, about what you asked at the trapper's cabin. Knox's heart quickened. And I think William would benefit greatly from having a father figure in his life, she said formally, then broke into a smile. And I would benefit greatly from having the man I love beside me every day. Is that a yes, Mrs. Preston? Knox asked, drawing her closer. It's a yes, Mr. Blackwood, Violet replied. Though I should warn you, ranching with me won't be peaceful. I'm stubborn, opinionated, and not inclined to sit quietly while men make decisions. I would expect nothing less, Knox assured her. Your spirit is what I fell in love with 7 years ago. It's what I love now. Their kiss was a promise of partnership, of family, of a future built together on the land they both loved. Epilogue. 1 year later, the autumn sunset painted the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson as Knox Blackwood stood on the porch of the Preston Blackwood ranch house, watching his wife and stepson return from their afternoon ride. William, now 6, sat tall in his saddle, proudly demonstrating the proper posture Knox had taught him. The past year had brought changes to all their lives. Knox and Violet had married in a simple ceremony in the town church 3 months after Hollister's conviction. The banker was now serving a 10-year sentence in the territorial prison. His scheme to acquire mining properties through fraudulent foreclosures having been fully exposed by the marshal's investigation. The Preston Ranch, now the Preston Blackwood Ranch, had flourished under their joint management. Knox's experience and connections had brought new breeding stock and improved techniques, while Violet's financial acumen kept them profitable, despite fluctuating cattle prices. William had embraced Knox as a stepfather with the uncomplicated acceptance of childhood. He proudly told anyone who would listen that he had 2 fathers, one in heaven watching over us, and one here teaching me to be a rancher. As Violet and William reached the yard, Catherine emerged from the house with a bundle in her arms. Margaret Eleanor Blackwood, born 2 months earlier and named for both grandmothers. Catherine had moved to the ranch after the wedding, taking charge of William's education and helping with the new baby. Look how high I can post, William called, demonstrating his riding technique. Knox says I'm a natural horseman. Indeed you are, Violet agreed, dismounting gracefully despite having only recently returned to riding after Margaret's birth. Though perhaps you should start using Pa instead of Knox now that the baby's here. It might get confusing otherwise. William considered this as Knox helped him down from his pony. Can I? Would that be all right? Nothing would make me prouder, Knox assured him, his heart full at the boy's question. As Catherine took William inside to wash for dinner, Violet handed the baby to Knox and leaned against him, watching the sunset. Happy? She asked softly. Knox looked at his wife, at the infant in his arms, at the thriving ranch spread before them. Beyond words, he replied. You. Violet's smile was answer enough, but she added, I keep thinking about how differently things might have turned out if Catherine hadn't written to you, If you hadn't come, I would have found my way back to you eventually, Knox said with certainty. Some things are meant to be. As if in agreement, little Margaret made a contented sound in her father's arms. Inside, they could hear William chattering excitedly to Catherine about his riding lesson. From the bunkhouse came the sound of the ranch hands gathering for their evening meal, a family of a different sort, but family nonetheless. "We should go in," Violet said eventually. "It's getting cool." But they lingered a moment longer, savoring the peaceful ending to the day and the promise of all the days to come, days they would face together, as they had always been meant to do. "I love you, Violet Blackwood," Knox said simply. "And I love you," she replied, "for always." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they turned together toward the warm light of home, toward the future they had fought for, and won, a future built on rekindled love and the steadfast promise of forever.